All right. Welcome everyone to a tutorial video on exercise 6 of CEEN 267 with Jeff Hawley, the one and only. I'm not Jeff Hawley. I'm Bo. I'm just the TA for this fall 2024 semester. But yeah, lots of students have requested kind of a walkthrough on the grading design for this pond that we're going to do. And we're just going to jump straight into things. So, taking a look at the assignment, our end result has to be a pond that resembles something like this. Now, the design itself can differ, but we'll get more so into those details later. The deliverable is a printout with your pond that has to have a specified volume, no less than, I believe it's 5,000 feet, whatever the rubric on Canvas says, cubic feet, I mean, and plenty of arrows denoting the direction of flow and the slope of the flow, as well as, and it's not pictured here, a spot elevation for the bottom elevation of the pond. But we'll get into all those details later. For now, let's jump straight into Civil 3D. So the first line that we're going to place is going to be the bottom of our pond. And it's important that we do this as what's called a polyline. Creating it as a polyline will ensure that it's all one closed shape and that we'll be able to convert it to a feature line down the road. So let's just say I wanted to make my shape for the bottom of my pond. And let's just do something like this little hexagon style shape. There's no super specific rhyme or reason for what I'm doing. I'm just making a fun shape. Now we can see when I select it, it's all the entire shape is highlighted. Even though I drew 6 different lines, if I were to draw the same shape using just the regular line tool, the end result would be getting 6 different lines, and none of them are connected to one another. This is why it's important. See, when I highlight one, not all of them are connected. This is why it's important to use a polyline. It will Civil 3D will recognize it all as one cohesive shape and just make our life a whole lot easier. So, moral of the story, use a polyline. Next step is we're going to create a feature line defined by the polyline. All that means is that we'll go up here to our toolbar, or sorry, our ribbon, up to where it says feature line, and we're going to click create feature lines from objects. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to select our polyline and hit enter. Now, each feature line that we create today is going to have a name. This one is just going to be pond bottom. Pond bottom. And then when I hit enter, you'll see that nothing happened. That's because now, if we look over here, the properties of this line is that it's a feature line. Whereas previously, it was a polyline. If I were to click on the line that I just made, you'll see on this left side of the screen, it says polyline. That's just a simple way of telling what our line is, feature line, once again. So before I take any more steps further, I need to define the surface that I'm working in. Now, this is done in the toolbar menu. We have the properties menu over here on the left, but if I just type toolbar, then this is not something that I've seen before. Oh, tool space. Sorry about that. Yeah, if we open our tool space menu, we'll see a familiar looking menu here on the left. What we're going to do is we need to create a new surface because this new surface is going to hold our pond and we're going to connect it to the existing topo surface. All that we need to do is right click on the word surfaces say create surface. Right click, create surface, and then change a couple things around. So the name on the left side, we're just going to call this proposed, because it's our proposed surface. And the style right here, this is going to give us the blue and green lines for our grading that we'll see down the line. For instance, this existing contours 1 and 5, this is the style of the existing topo, all these dashed lines. That is that specific style. If I were to go down here, and then it says select surface style, I'm going to click this arrow and change that to proposed contours 1 and 5, because we don't want the new surface that we create to be the same style as the surface that exists. So now we're going to click OK. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go down here onto our proposed surface, and we're just going to open up propose and open up definition. That way we know, okay, we're working in the proposed surface. We don't want to add anything to our existing topo because that's simply not what we came here to do. So with our proposed surface open, we're going to return to it and do a couple of things in a bit. Going back to our model, what we're going to do is click on our feature line that's the bottom of the pond, and we want to go up here to the elevation editor. Once we click on that, you'll see these triangles appear around the vertices. And if we look over here at the window that just popped up, we'll see that each of these vertices corresponds to one, at least, or to one of the points on the triangle or on the polyline. And we'll see that they all have a surface elevation of 0. Now, what does this mean? This means that if we were to just change our structure here to look in the 3D, we'll see our line right here that's kind of pivoting a little bit at an elevation of 0. But if we look all the way up, we'll see, oh, it came up really quickly. But this is our surface. It's a little funky. Essentially, because our elevation is at 0, sorry for all the moving around. You don't have to do any of this on your design. And because our elevation is at 0, this feature line isn't connected to this surface, as we just saw. But if we click on it, and then we open up our elevation editor, it's a super simple fix. Is we'll select this line, this first row, and then we'll do Control A. Oops. Nope, we do not want to do that. Okay, escape, escape, escape. When in doubt, escape and try again. We'll want to click in here, click Control A. And then whenever we edit one of these, that'll just change all the elevations to the same point. The reason that we're doing that is because we want the elevation at the bottom of this pond to be uniform. We don't want one side to be lower than the other, et cetera, et cetera. So if we click all of these, now we need to define, or we need to decide what the elevation at the bottom is going to be. The way that I've been doing that has been by looking at the lines coming across the design and picking one that's around the midpoint of the pond. So if we look at the existing design over here, we'll see that this line kind of comes right across the middle. If we follow that back, we're at 5956. So that's what I'm going to make the base of my pond. And we can always change that later if we decide that we need more volume. And that'll just be a matter of changing a couple things down the line. So 5956, and boom, all of that is in 5956. And the bottom of our pond is officially at the approximate same elevation as our topography here. Now, if we go back to our proposed surface, we're going to do something called a break line. We're going to add a break line. Now, what this break line does is it kind of helps to define the edge of a graded area so that when we grade the sides of our pond upwards, it'll know, okay, this is a very clearly defined point, and I know to, well, break at that point. So anywho, we're just going to call this pond bottom as well, and then hit enter. And now, if you look at the cursor, that little gray box, it says select objects. All that we're going to do is select our feature line and hit enter. Now, what do you know? Nothing happened again, but we see here that our pond bottom was added. Now we can get to the actual part of the assignment where we do the grading. Now, what we're going to do is grade up the sides of the pond. So to help you visualize it, let's imagine that this is the bottom of our pond and we want to grade upwards like that. And then eventually we'll go like that as well. This is the bottom of the pond that we just drew, that line. This is just kind of a side view. Next up, we're going to grade doing that side of the pond. So how do we do that? I'll just move this guy off to the side and we'll come back to him later. How do we do that? We do it by going up here under our home menu to create design, and we're going to look at grading, the little grading tool right here. Now, if we click on this and then go down to grading creation tools, we'll click on that guy and up pops this little old looking window. This is how we're going to grade. So what we need to do is first define the grading group. This is if we had a bunch of elevation gradings that we were just going to group together, and then our surface. On what surface are we grading on top of? So this first one, we're going to change that, and we're just going to call this grading group 1 and hit enter. And you'll see that that is populated here in this space. Next up, our surface, which is this second icon right here. And we want our surface to be our existing topo. Now, it might seem counterintuitive because you think, well, I'm grading my proposed surface. That's true, but you're grading it to your existing topo. And that's why we need to have our our surface that we're grading onto to be our existing topo. This is going to help us link our pond to the existing topography that we're given. So if I do existing topo and then hit OK, we're good to grade. This first one that we're going to do, remember, is this side right here. This side right here. That one. So we need to grade upwards at a specific angle from the bottom of the pond. So we're going to do grade to relative elevation. And that essentially says, okay, let's say the bottom of this pond right here, let's say that this bottom elevation is 5956. That is incredibly tiny. I have no idea where it went. That's fine. So let's say that that elevation is 5956 down here. All that we're going to do is define the height of the pond. So we say from this point here, from this point here, what is going to be the perfectly vertical elevation that we want to do? And then it's going to ask us to set the slope, which is going to define the angle that we're going to have between there. So let's just do that. Grade to relative elevation, and we're going to click on this little tool right here, the little star with the grading slope, create grading. And we're going to select our feature, which is the bottom of our pond. The next thing that it asks is for the grading side. So we don't want to grade on the inside of our pond. We want to grade outwards and upwards. And then it asks, apply to entire length. And yes, we want to apply it to the entire length around the pond. So When it says relative elevation, it means from that point, do we want to go up above our feature line or down below it? If I were to do -5, it would grade it 5 feet below our pond. But let's say that I want to grade it up by, let's just say 4 feet. So I can just keep it as 4, positive 4. If I were to do negative, it would go down 4 feet. For positive, it's going up 4 feet. And then I'm just going to hit enter. Next up, it asks what the slope is. So in other words, it's asking this line right here, what do you want the slope to be? So it's asking for the format first. Grade is a percentage. Slope is the 3-to-1, 4-to-1 that we've been looking at. So let's do slope. And now it's asking for the numerical value. This is the important part that we're going to consult the rubric for. If I go to our Canvas page and look at the assignments for this assignment, the rubric for this assignment, sorry. And then I go to pond grading, Civil 3D. Looking at the rubric, it says a maximum slope is 3-to-1, flatter slopes of 4-to-1 are preferred. So if I go back to our design, because it's the inside of the pond, I'm fine with making it steeper. So I'm just going to say 3-to-1 and then hit enter. And if you look at that, you'll see that we have kind of the top corner of our pond. This line is symbolic of this corner, this vertex right here, all around the edge perimeter of our pond. So one other thing that we want to do, you'll see, oh no, look at all these little exclamation points. Something must be wrong. In a sense, yes, but in a much more real sense, we just need to go here and click Rebuild Automatic. And that means that anytime we make a grading change, it'll automatically regenerate it so that we don't have to worry about things kind of staying messed up. So now that that's done, you'll notice we got this upper line, but we didn't get any of the fun elevation lines in between. That's because we need to add this top one as a break line. And we'll go pond top and then hit enter. And once we select this top line and hit enter, boom, look at that. We've got this cool spiderweb style. Peter Parker would be very proud of what we've got going on here. And yeah, so now that we have this defined, we need to do the second part of this. So if we look at the rubric again, we'll see that sorry, if we look at our example, we'll see that we're supposed to have this little walkway around the top portion of our design. What we're going to do to create that, according to the specifications given by Jeff in class, of a 2% slope, is we're going to use a different type of grading tool. We previously did grade to relative elevation, but now we're going to do grade to distance. Essentially, we need that walkway to be 5 feet around the perimeter of the pond. That 5 feet will, using this tool will allow us to do that. So with these other things remaining the same, grading group 1, existing topo, we're going to select create grading, and we're going to go on this top feature line now. If we click on it, yes, we want to apply it to the entire length of the pond. And now it's asking for the distance around it. We can either just straight up type it right here, or we can go down here into the dialog box and type it there. But I'm just going to say 5, and you'll look that that's populated down there. And then when I hit enter, it's going to ask for the format. So let's do grade now. We know that we want it to be a 2% slope, super duper mild. And now, well, what do you know? There it is. 5 feet at a 2% slope and going upwards and grading wonderfully just like that. Now, just to tie in our other elevation points, let's also add this as a feature line, or sorry, not as a feature line, as a break line by going right over here and right clicking and saying add to the break lines. In the description, we're just going to call this walkway and hit enter. Now it wants us to select the object, and when we do that and hit enter, it adds it as a break line. Nothing really happened in terms of things generating down here, but now we're at least able to see what this, it's more defined. It'll make our grading a little bit cleaner. Now, the last thing that we're going to do for the grading is we're going to go back up here and use our final tool, and this is going to really tie in our grading onto the surface. And this is accomplished just by clicking right here, grade to distance, or not grade to distance, sorry, grade to surface, cut first. It doesn't really matter if we do cut first or fill first, but let's just do cut first. So when we go here, create grading tool, just like we've been doing, and we select this feature, our top line, our walkway line, when we click on that, yes, we do want to apply it to the entire length. We want our cut format. This is going back to our rubric where it was saying flatter slopes of 4:1 are preferred. Now, when it's saying cut, what that means is material that's going to be moved. It's going to need to be excavated. It's going to need to be cut from the surface. So all of the surfaces that have material removed, we want to grade that at a 4:1 slope. Fill, this is where you're going to put material. So when you're bringing material onto the site, you're moving things around, you want this material to be at what slope? Enter, and I'm going to say 4:1 as well. And when I hit enter, it's now going to populate our design, and we see, oh boy, there's a lot going on here. So all these regions in red, this is our cut. Essentially, all that this means is that material within this red boundary and around here needs to be removed. This green right over here, this is our fill area, meaning that we can take some of this material down here and we can plop it down here. Something worth looking into in the future as this is kind of being accomplished is, okay, can I balance that? Can I make sure that my cut and my fill are the same so that I don't have to bring material onto the site or remove it from the site? It just saves money down the line. Now, one thing that I'm going to do is you can notice right over here on the left side of my design, we have this weird cut or this weird jump right here. That's just because my cut line is extending beyond the topography of my site. So I need to move my pond over in order to make sure that it fits. To do that, I'm going to send the grading to the back so that I can grab my base feature line. Everything is linked to this line. So when I type move and specify just some point here, when I scooch it around, everything else is going to move with it. Now we'll also notice that my grading kind of broke. It got mad at me and it ran away. What I'm going to do is just create or grade to surface, cut first, select this feature line out here, the entire length, and I'm pretty much just going to do the same thing. I want it to be a 4:1 slope, fill, I want that to be a 4:1 slope as well. And now it's acting weird. All right, voiceover Beau here. So at this point, I had made a mistake and I had accidentally moved my pond bottom to a completely different elevation. This is just me troubleshooting that. And Beau in the video will explain momentarily how that was fixed. Okay, there we go. Everything is back as it should be. Balance is restored. All that I had to do was, when I moved it, my elevation of the bottom feature line was way off. It ended up being 11,000 feet rather than the 5,000 that we've been working with. So if you decide to move it, make sure that yours doesn't accidentally jump up an extra 5,000 feet into the air, and you should be all right. Anywho, back to business. This is it. This is our grading on the exterior. Now, all that we need to do in order to get the nice grading lines that we so dearly love is we need to make this into a break line. And all that we need to do here is just go right click on break lines and say add, and then we'll call this daylight, our daylight line. Because this is, I don't know, ask Jeff why it's called that. I'm going to select on it and then hit enter. And voila, these are our grading lines. But we'll see that they're kind of, well, we've got some stragglers here. It doesn't look too cleaned up. It's like me before a haircut. But what we're gonna do now, in order to fix that, is go here on boundaries, and we're gonna right click, say add, and then the name of the boundaries, I'm just gonna call this daylight again. And when I select on it, boom, it's given a nice haircut. One other thing that I noticed, if you had the same kerfuffle that I did, you might need to redo this. But if not, then I just accidentally deleted my walkway break line. So I'm just going and adding that in now. Marvelous. This is it. This is our pond. Let's check to see how it looks compared to the one on here. What else we need to take care of to add. So if we look right here, we'll see towards the middle of the site, they have a slope arrow going into the pond, and then a couple on exterior sides, along with elevation markers for the majority of these contours. Now, if I remember correctly, we also need a spot elevation. So let's go ahead and get those guys taken care of. One other thing that I'm going to do while I'm here is going to take a look and see how it looks in our model space. Marvelous. These little diamonds, I'm just realizing this now, these little diamonds are essentially little selection tools for all the grading that we've done. If I click on this diamond, it'll select on the grading from our walkway to our surface. If I select on this diamond, it's going to go from the top of our pond to our walkway. If I select on this diamond, it's going to go from the bottom of our pond to the top of our pond. Essentially the 3 different gradings that we've done over the course of this design. One other thing, before we get to all of our slope arrows, we'll notice that the pond over here doesn't have our main daylight line going around the outside edge. All that I'm going to do in order to remove that is click on the daylight line and then right click, and I'm just going to say isolate and then hide. I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but by golly, that's kind of how I've been taught to do it. And I'm going to do that for those long sort of stringer lines as well. That just makes sure that they're all hidden. Marvelous. Now what we can do is if we go up to our ribbon over here and we hit annotate, that brings us over to our annotate tab. And today it's going to be all labels, all labels. We're going to click Add Labels. And what we need to do, and I am going to close our tool space right here to give us a little bit more room. What we need to do is we need to select the feature. Previously, we've been working with lines and curves, and that's well and fine. But today, we've been working with surfaces. So if I go Feature and then Surface, and I click on that, it'll ask me for the label type. You'll see Spot Elevation, Contour. Those are all ones that we're going to get to momentarily, but we want our slope. And let's see what format it gives it to. It gives us to in the rubric, but I'm going to do our slope label in the x:1 format rather than a percent slope. If we look over here, it's also given in the x:1 format. So 4:1, 3:1, etc., etc. Okay, so we have our label tool with our surface, our slope, and our x:1 surface slope label. And we just said that we want to select a singular point, a 1-point slope option. All that this means is that with any one click, it'll give us a slope at that point. Now remember, we set the slope going into our lot, into our pond at 3:1, way at the beginning, and then the slope's going out at 4:1. So I'm just gonna place a couple of those down in here, and then another one right there. So taking a look at that, that looks pretty good. And we can, of course, grab these guys with a single click, and then another single click, and we can drag them around until we're pleased. I'm quite pleased with how these guys are right now. But now, if I go and click down here, sorry, up here, I want a spot elevation. I want to make a spot elevation. I believe these are the different types of labels. We can always come back and change them, but I'll just do standard and then spot elevation X. And the spot elevation is, I want to know the elevation of the bottom of my pond. So I'm going to click add and click in the bottom of my pond. Oops, sorry. I'm going to click on the surface first, which is our proposed. And then I'm going to select a point, bottom of the pond, boom. That's it. That's all there is to it. And last but not least, I want to go back to our label type, slope, spot elevation, contour. I want to do contour multiple at interval. And I want to say contour proposed label. This is not our existing surface. This is our proposed surface. Minor contour label, we also want that to be proposed. And then made user contour label style, we'll just make that one proposed as well. All of these are the proposed. Now when I hit add, we're going to select our surface again, click, and we're going to pick the first point on our surface. So I'm going to click this upper contour line, and then the second point right there, and the contour along, or the interval along contour, to my understanding, that is every so many feet. So I want it to be in 2-foot intervals. So when I hit enter, my Civil 3D decides to freak out. And I realized I was horrendously wrong. So I'm going to Control Z the heck out of that. Move my contour or my slope arrow there. And then bring back up my label window. Because I hit escape, it escaped me. But if I go to feature, surface, and then I'm actually just going to do contour single, because now I remember that the single versus the multiple is how many of the same contours you want along a given line. And because our site is small enough, we really only need one contour label on each line. So if I go here, single, great. I want proposed contour label, proposed contour label, proposed contour label, and add. And now when I click, I'm going to select the contour line, boom, tells me 59, 59. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and I'm just going to do it at 2 feet intervals. No sense in crowding it too much. Going all the way down until I've reached, a good point. I don't really feel the need to put one there. It's so small, it'll crowd it out. But let's do a similar thing up here. So this should be 62, and then 64, 66. And I'm just going to do this a couple of times throughout the lot. I can add another one here. 62, 64. And last but not least, I want to add some going on the interior of my pond. Let's see how they do it in the example. Okay, perfect. So I have this guy, this bottom one, at 56, 58, 60. Marvelous. So that just about does it. I'm going to hit escape and I'm going to go here. I'm just going to delete this label. Ooh, not the whole thing, just this label. And then not the whole thing, but just this label. Okay, let's take a look at how this plotted on our paper space. Wow, look at that. Ain't she pretty? So one last thing that we need to do is if we look at the example and I go over here and I see this, it has this cool generated graph or a table of all of these values regarding the pond that we generated. Now you might be thinking, oh boy, that looks like some fun math that I never want to do. And you betcha we're not going to do them. We're going to let Civil 3D do it for us. So if we go back to Civil 3D, if we go back to our model down here, we're going to use this cool feature called stage storage. And all that we're going to do is type stage storage or just stage, and it pops up there too. And we don't need to fill in any of these guys. But what we want to do is we want to define our basin. So we'll want to define it from our entity, which is essentially like saying we're going to define it based off of our model that we have here. So if we click define basin, we're going to click define basin from polylines, and we are going to do this in such a way that we only select the lines on the interior of the pond. We don't want any sort of stage storage values for the grading lines on the outside of the pond, just those on the inside. So we're going to say extract objects from surface, and then it's going to ask us, okay, select a surface. Boom. So now that we've selected our surface, it knows that we want to grade on, or it knows that we want to select the values on our proposed surface. We're going to say define. Now we can select the individual polylines on the inside of our basin, the inside of our pond, going up to the top. Now, mind you, this edge is our sidewalk. The outermost edge is our sidewalk, and we don't want to include that in our space because, heck, we don't want people sloshing around as they're walking on the sidewalk of our pond. That's a big no-no. So we're only going to do the ones inside. And now that we've selected the 4 or 5 that are in there, we're going to hit enter. And look at this lovely table that it populates right here. It does all the math for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. What we're going to do is a fancy little maneuver that I call the claw. And this is in the real world. This isn't in Civil 3D. Essentially, if you've got a Windows, you're just going to take a screenshot of this, but using Shift Windows S at the same time, you can just grab a screenshot of our tool or of our lovely table. And then when we go into our paper space, we can close that out. All that we're going to do is we're going to do Control V, and insert our table into there. Ta-da! Look at that. And we can resize it a little bit to make it fit. But this is, in general, all that we need to do. Just going to scooch it over a little bit. Now that we have our table here, we have our final volume of our pond in this value down here, 14,000. What are the units? I believe it's cubic feet, but I could be wrong. Yeah, cubic feet. 14,000 cubic feet. That's a lot of damage. That's a whole lot of cubic feet, and way more than the rubric says here on Canvas, 5,000 cubic feet. Now, let's just verify that we've got everything. At least one spot elevation. Yep. Slopes, proposed contours. We've got those. Proposed grading ties into the existing all around. We made sure that we did that when we did our grade to surface. We've got our 3-to-1 and our 4-to-1 slopes. Pond volume is greater than 5,000 cubic feet. And I'll say our example looks a whole lot like the one here. So I'm happy to call that. I just need to make sure to fill in the title right in here by going by creating little M texts in our annotate tab, multi-line text. And we're just going to say like this from here to here. And all that I'm going to do is call that exercise 6, grading design. And I should probably make all this all caps. Grading design. Marvelous. Close text editor. Scale. We're going to use a scale that it's given to us just over to the side and say 1 inch equals 30 feet. Marvelous. Who is it drawn by? Bo. Excellent TA. That is my name. You can check my birth certificate, but it's on there. And then last but not least, the date. And the day is today. You can put the actual date in there. I just think it's quirky to put that. But that being said, this is your completed pond. Feel free to email me with any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for tuning in, and happy grading.